Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Demai Perek Aleph Halacha Beis. We are going to be learning Daf Hey. We left off on Daf Hey Amud Aleph, the second line from the top of the Amid. We are in the middle of the Mishnah, towards the end of the Mishnah. The Mishnah is speaking about many leniencies that we have by Ma'aser Sheni Shel Demai, which is not like the original Ma'aser Sheni. The last law that we learned in last year was that Ma'aser Sheni, money, in other words, when you already exchanged the payers onto money, if there is no pressing need, you're not allowed to exchange that money on produce outside Yerushalmi. That money must be taken to Yerushalmi, and obviously in Yerushalmi, you will there exchange the money onto produce, but without a doichak, without a pressing need, you may not do so outside Yerushalmi. And what we learned yesterday, that was the top line of Daf Hey Amud Aleph, that Ma'aser Sheni Shel Demai, that was exchanged for money. The money could be used to buy produce even lechatchila, even without a pressing need outside Yerushalmi. And now that will lead us into the final rule of the Mishnah. And I know that there are two different girsais in this final line, which is on Daf Hey Amud Aleph. Right, we have the girsa ubilvad sheyachzoid. We're going to actually go with the girsa v'yachzoid, and we're going to follow one approach. We'll see the approach of the Marafullah, in which the question now will be, when you did such a thing, so you have produce, but guys, remember, this is not the produce of Ma'aser Sheni. Ma'aser Sheni Shel Demai, that you were paid onto money, right? We already learned you didn't have to add a chaimish. Now you, not because of a doichak, you use that money and you bought produce outside Yerushalmi. Now the question is whether that produce must be taken to Yerushalmi. You have to now take that up, which is the sheet of the Chachamim. And the way we are learning Pshat and Rav Meir, that Rav Meir is lenient and he will allow for you to, again, take that produce and exchange it onto money, take the money to Yerushalmi. And over there, obviously, you'll have to make the final pidyon, which is you have to buy the fruit, buy food or drink, and eat it and consume it in Yerushalmi and HaKodesh. That will be the end of the Mishnah. The Gemara is going to go back and expound our Mishnah. For some reason, we're going to give a suggestion that Rashi Cyrilio gives. The Gemara doesn't begin ala seder, because the first din that we have in the Mishnah is that hadamai eloi chaimish. That will not be the first topic that the Gemara will explain. The Gemara is going to begin with the second rule of the Mishnah, that eloi biur. Now, what we will quote now, and this is something that we will learn in greater detail in the Sechtes Ma'aser Sheni, that Yochanan Kohen Gadol abolished vidui ma'aser, which is really a biblical obligation, that which is done together with the biur ma'aseres. Vidui ma'aseres is a parsha in Kisove in the beginning that's explicit, that when it comes to these two times in the 7-year cycle, let's just follow consistently Shitas HaRambam. We are more familiar with the Rambam. We learn the Rambam. We should be learning the Rambam, that it's done on Erev Shvi Shel Pesach, on the 4th year, and Erev Shvi Shel Pesach on the 7th year. Not only do you do biur, but you have to make a declaration, and that's called vidui ma'aseres. And it's a beautiful declaration. There's a lot of thanksgiving to God in the declaration, but the point of the vidui in this context is not vidui, I'm confessing that I sinned, but you have to declare that I separated all the ma'aseres. Yochanan Kohen Gadol abolished the vidui ma'aseres. How can the Chachamim do that? B'chlal, there's a rule that yesh koyach b'yad Chachamim la'akar davar min ha'torah b'sheva al taisa. Really, they even have a greater koyach than that, but let's leave that a more known statement. And the Gemara has a misunderstanding with that which Yochanan Kohen Gadol did, and that will become clarified. That will be the first shtickle sugya that we're going to learn today. We're going to extrapolate a law from the fact that Ma'aser Sheni of the Mai is allowed to be eaten by an oinen, even though Ma'aser Sheni Vadai, the Torah says that part of the vidui is to say Lo yochaltu mimeni ba'oinin. We're going to go from there to explain the next din in the Mishnah, that the Mai ein lo chaimish. We're going to find a general rule applied over here, a general rule throughout Shas, that Rav Meir is machmir B'divrayim k'divrei Torah. That's only Shitas Rav Meir. The Chachamim's opinion is, and that's just as an example, something that we are familiar with, that Safik Doiraisa is L'chumra. Safik Midrabanan is L'kula. Rav Meir doesn't subscribe to that. Rav Meir holds that the same approach of Chumra that we have to have to a Doiraisa, you have to have to a Darabanan, and we're going to give a Gabaldik example. We're going to learn about the ground zero of the statement, of this Machlekes, and how that will become applicable over here. And then we're going to have in the Gemara going back to the Chaimish, to the first din in the Mishnah that had the Mai Ein Lo Chaimish, and we're going to differentiate between our Mishnah's Meiser Sheni Shel Demai, the Meiser Sheni of the Mai, versus other halachas. For example, as we mentioned, that when you have the Mai, you have to separate Meiser and Ha-Meiser. And you should know that by Meiser and Ha-Meiser, there is also a din of a Chaimish. No one can be paid the Meiser and Ha-Meiser is Truma. But the din of the Chaimish by Truma and by Meiser and Ha-Meiser is that what were to happen if a Yisrael or a non-Kohen b'shoigeg ate up a Kohen's Truma. They are penalized by not only giving back to the Kohen the value that they ate, they have to add a Chaimish. And we're going to see that even though the Mishnah says that Meiser Sheni doesn't have a Chaimish, we'll explain this in detail, but when it comes to Meiser and Ha-Meiser of the Mai, there is a Chaimish. And we're going to have to explain why. If there's no Chaimish by the Mai, why by Meiser Sheni is there no Chaimish? The Mishnah says that. And why by Meiser and Ha-Meiser, in the case that I just mentioned, why is there a Chaimish? And we're going to learn a big rule when it comes to Truma, that I know we just came off Masechtas Peah, and we explained how Peah really the mitzvah is to leave it in the field. Masha Enkin Meiser, you have to give it to the Kohen, which is also good. You get to choose to which Kohen you want to give it to. You get to choose to what Levi you want to give it to. But one thing we never spoke out in the previous Masechta, which is that even though that the Balabas is going to be giving it to the Kohen, what happens if my field is 5 miles outside the city? Am I obligated to bring it into the city to give it to the Kohen? Or, as we'll see, the onus is on the Kohen to go to the field. I give it to him. I choose to whom I give it to. But the pshat of me giving it to him is not that I have to bring it to his doorstep. Actually, the Kohen is responsible to go pick it up, to go to the Goyden. Now, we're going to learn exceptions to that. What will happen if my field is at a place, that what happens if the Kohen doesn't come? And if I'll leave it there, what happens if it's going to get stolen? So there is a concept of Ashava Saveda, as we'll see, that listen, that I do have some responsibility, me meaning the owner, the balabas. But if there is no worry of it getting lost, again, this is a big din we'll learn today, that the onus of Maisris is on the Kohen and on the Levi to pick up. And I know that we have a Levi here, Shlomi, just to remind ourselves, we learned this many times in the Bavli, we're going to touch on it also today. And this really began with Ezra, that when Ezra wanted to gather the Jews of Babel, that they should go live in Eretz Yisrael. This is during the times of the beginning of Bayesheni. There were very, very few Levium that went with him. And he was so upset at the Levium that he made a takana that Meiser Rishon should not be given to Levium. Now that's a big topic. First of all, how can he do that? And who should he give it to? Give it to the Kahanim. Let's go today with the Shita that holds that even before Ezra's takana, God says, Meiser Rishon, give it to a Levi. Don't forget, Chevra, that a Kohen is also from the tribe of a Levi. A Kohen is Chochet HaLevi. Elama, Meiser Rishon could be given even to a non-Kohen. Can be given to a Rab Shloim. Ezra made a takana that you cannot give it to a Levi, you have to give it to a Kohen. And that really is going to touch, according to Reish Lakish, why Yochanan and Kohen Gadol ultimately said that you don't do Vidui Meisers. We're going to get back to that. It's an interesting thing. Now, the question is, did that takana go throughout the whole Zman Bayesheni? Or at some point, there were Levium. You're kidding? Who did the avoid of the Levium? The Levium did it. Okay, we're not going to get into many details, but we're just going to touch upon this today also as well. And now, after this Langa Hagdama, but this is more or less Daf Hey. It's good to chop it this way. We're going to Daf Hey Yom Aleph. We're going to the second line from the top, in middle of the Mishnah. There's a machlekes rishonim regarding the girsa. We will not read it ubolbat sheyachzer, but we will read v'yachzer. So just reminding everyone, we're talking about Meiser Sheni Shel Demai Peiros, that you redeemed on money without adding a chaimish. and you are allowed lechatchila shaloi midoichek outside Yerushalayim to take the money and to buy peiros for whatever reason, even though you can't eat the peiros outside Yerushalayim, but you bought it outside Yerushalayim. And now the question is, what do you do with those peiros? So if it would be Meiser Sheni Vadai, that you were paid on peiros, and midoichak, you bought peiros again, L'kula alma, you would be chayiv now to take those peiros in Yerushalayim. You can't keep on going back and forth, peiros money, peiros money, peiros money. But over here, according to Rav Meir, according to our girsa, it's more Meiko, since we're speaking about Ma'aseh Sheni of the Mai, not ubelvad, that if you want, v'yachziv v'yiftas ha'peiros, you can actually redeem it on money, and again take the money to Yerushalayim. Divrei Rav Meir. However, the Chachamim hold that even though it's Ma'aseh Sheni Shel Demai, and even though, yes, you were allowed lechatchila shaloi medoichak to take the ma'os that you were paid the Ma'aseh Sheni Shel Demai, and you can buy, the Mishnah gave an example, put it onto nechoishes that in itself was called peiros. So buy peiros. Once you did that, those peiros have to be taken to Yerushalayim. Meaning Rav Meir is the Mekel. Okay. Now, we already mentioned in the Hagdam. The other way is that you can go back and forth. No, not yet. That's something else today. Okay. Now, the Mishnah's first rule was that Ma'aseh Sheni Shel Demai Ein Lo Chomish. The Gemara is not focusing on that over here, even though there is one Ma'aseh Keli here that actually changes the seder of the Gemara. We're going to read the Gemara the way we have it. There is a reason why we're skipping over Chomish. We're going to come to Chomish soon in the Gemara. Okay, we'll read the Rashadilio to see his suggested opinion. The next din in the Mishnah is Ve'ein Lo Bir. Which what does that imply? That Ma'aseh Sheni Shel Vadai, there is a din of beer, and of course it's a din Torah. The Gemara's kasha is based on a misunderstanding. The Gemara's kasha is, we know that Yochanan Kohen Gadol, this is not in the beginning of Vayesheni, but when Yochanan Kohen Gadol, who was the one that made the whole takon of the Mai, Yochanan Kohen Gadol said, from his time and onwards, there is no more vidui Ma'aseh Sheni. Why did he make that takana? The Gemara is not even talking about it over here. I want you to know that in the Masechtas Ma'aseh Sheni, in the Yerushalmi, and Daf Nun Ches, in the way we have our pagination, we have over there a machlekes Rabbi Yechanan and Reish Lakish. Let me just quote Reish Lakish because I don't want to get too far off. Reish Lakish says, like we mentioned in the Hagdama, that since Ezra already made a takana not to give the Ma'aseh Sheni to a Levi, part of the vidui is that you're saying that I did exactly the way you commanded me. We were not doing it the way God commanded. God commanded to give Ma'aser Rishon to a Levi. Ezra made a takana to give it to a Kohen. Even though we said a Kohen could be Izrechet HaLevi, so that's what we're going to learn more about it on Ma'aser Sheni. Yochanan Kohen Gadol felt that the vidu you cannot say anything. That's clear. Nekuda. The Gemara's misunderstanding here is that we thought, and the Havamina, whoever asked this question, thought that since Yochanan Kohen Gadol says that you don't do vidui, Muzman Zagen that he also abolished Biur Ma'aseh Sheni. That's the misunderstanding. And which means they thought, now guys, make no mistake, Biur Ma'aseh Sheni, think about it, doesn't mean that the owner won't do the mitzvah. He'll do the mitzvah. The question is there a cutoff point? In other words, I separated Truma, like we mentioned. For me to eat the fruit, I have to separate Truma, I have to separate all of the mices. After that, I can eat the remaining. Though that produce, I have to give to the Kohen, to the lady. To the ani, I have to give it to them. Question is when. I don't have to give it right away. I can eat my chulin even before I give it. The Torah says, yeah, but you can't hold on to it for 50 years. Twice in the 7-year cycle, you have to remove it. You have to give it to them. The Havamina that he also abolished beer means, okay, you don't have that pressure. And by the way, the same thing is with Ma'aseh Sheni Shel Demai. The Mishnah says, Ein Lo Bir. Ein Lo Bir means that it's Taka Ma'aseh Sheni. I have to take it to Yerushalmi midrabanan, but I don't have to do it by Pesach, the 4th and the 7th year. But the Mishnah says only Ma'aseh Sheni Shel Demai doesn't have beer. The Gemara is asking, well, isn't it that from the times of Yochanan and Kohen Gadol, no Ma'aseh Sheni has beer? It's all the same now anyways. Let's read it inside. Which he did. He took away Vidoi. And again, the Havamin of the Gemara is that since he took away Vidoi, Mistama, he took away the obligation of doing biur. How can he do that? The same way he can take away the yesh koyach b'yad chachamim, however that is. So the Gemara says, no. One thing has nothing to do with the other. He'aviram shelo yisvadu. You're right that Yochanan Kohen Gadol was misaken, that from his time until the times of Mashiach, the Stama, right, we'll have to undo it. He made a takana. We have to reconvene a Sanhedrin to overdo his takana. But he made a takana, there's no vidui. No vidui does not mean that he said there's no beer. There is beer. Beer you have to do. Halavayir tzarech lavayir. And that's the Chiddush. However, and therefore our Mishnah says, what do you have to have beer on? That's only ubevadai. If it's vadai ma'aseh sheni. Avol b'dmai einoi tzarech lavayir. Beautiful. The next thing in the Mishnah means Chaimish we're coming back to is v'nechol la'oinen. Now you can already understand that not only is there's no beer, for sure, there's no vidui by Ma'aseh Sheni Shel Demai. Because what are you saying by the vidui? You're saying, Lo oichalti bo'oini mimenu. I never ate Ma'aseh Sheni as an oinen. And Ma'aseh Sheni Shel Demai is allowed to be eaten as an oinen. Now, in the pasuk where it says Lo oichalti mimeni bo'oini, the next line in the pasuk is V'lo vi'arti mimeni latami, which means I never ate it while I'm impure. And by the way, it goes both ways. It means that if the person is impure and the Ma'aseh Sheni is pure, the impure didn't eat it. Or the other way around. If the person is pure, but the Ma'aseh Sheni is impure, it also may not be eaten. Like Truma, that's impure. The Truma may not be eaten. We can use it for fuel. It means if it's Tamei, it's messed up. Whether the Ma'aseh Sheni. So our Mishnah says that it could be eaten to an oinen. What would you think, since the Torah says it together, that Ma'aseh Sheni cannot be eaten ba'aninus, it cannot be eaten b'tuma. Our Mishnah says, the mai could be eaten ba'aninus. You might have thought you can eat it b'tuma. Says the Gemara, that's not the case. Tani, we learned in a Braisa that, nechel ba'anina, like we just said, aber ve'ena nechel b'tuma, zoisloi. The question is, Vlad, why? In other words, are they making Ma'aseh Sheni Shel Demai like Ma'aseh Sheni or not? And it's in the same verse. It's mamash. Frag Gemara. What's the difference? Ma bein anino, ma bein tuma. So Amar Rav Nachman says, Rav Nachman, I'll tell you why. Tuma is something that happens often. Tuma mitzuya. You kidding? Today everyone is tummy. Aninos is very rare. Yeah, it happens. It could happen, but it's very rare for a very short amount of time. Goes through al davar shu matzui. The Chachamim, Yochanan Kohen Gadol said, when you buy it from an Amaretz who's telling you, I separated all the Maasers, there's a Gezerah. We don't fully trust him. We partially trust him. You have to separate Ma'aseh Sheni. Again, when they made that takana, they said it's Ma'aseh Sheni, right? So Tuma, which is something matzui, the Gezerah of the Chachamim goes on something that normally happens. Fakir, the Chachamim only make Gezerahs on Davar HaMatzui. Gazer al Davar Shu Matzui. V'loi Gazer al Davar She'enoi Matzui. And the Rash Shirili on the left side, 5 lines from the top, has a good liner. He says that if the Chachamim would say that you have to separate Ma'aseh Sheni Shel Demai, but you can eat it betuma, you know what would happen? People would not separate it. Everyone knows Ma'aseh Sheni you can't eat betuma. If they're going to tell you could eat it betuma, they're going to say, bechlal garnished. These words of Rashi earlier. When you say you have to do it, of course you have to behave like it's Ma'aseh Sheni. When? By the Davar Hamatzu, which means betuma you cannot eat it. Aninus is so rare that for that we can say for that unusual scenario, the emes, it's not the Ma'aseh Sheni. Midoi Raisa. You can eat it. Okay. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yosi. And this is a very deep understanding in what is exactly the Mai. We have a rule, my friends, that when you have a suffix, Do'iraisa, generally we're going to be Mahmud. When the Chachamim said that when you buy produce from an Amoritz who's saying I separated everything, we can't fully trust him, and you have to separate it. And not we touch demai, according to one opinion, is like doubt. Demai, what is it? I don't know. Don't forget that when you have a normal suffix, you have to be machmir. Omar Rabbi Yosi, that demai is not to be viewed as a normal suffix. Afilu kesafek tevel loy asu oisoi. Ilu besafek tevel, if we would have viewed the mai as a normal doubt, what's the din if safek nitaken machma sheni safek loy nitaken? What happens if you have produce? Not that the Amoritz is the one that's telling you something, but you cannot believe him, even though roiv. When you mamish don't know, you don't know. Only from Ma'aser Sheni. You don't know. What's the din if you don't know whether Ma'aser Sheni was removed? You own it. You're the balabas. You forgot whether you removed it. What do you have to do? It's not called the mai. You have to remove it. And when you remove it, what will be the din? You cannot eat that ba'aninus. Like any other suffix doiraisa. I'm chayiv to do something. I don't know whether I did it or not. So first of all, you have to do it. Right? That's the whole din. Like, for example, they have a doubt whether you daven the tefillah. That's the din of Shulchan Aruch. Since the zmanei tefillah is midrabanan, you have a doubt, you don't have to do it. If I have a doubt, we learned this in brachas. If I have a doubt whether I said Shema, I'm chayiv to do it. You have a doubt there, so you have to do it. And when you do it, misafek, you cannot eat it baninos, because maybe it's like a ma'aser sheni. If we were viewed to the mais, the Chachamim said that don't fully believe the Amoritz, so you have a suffix. Then the Mishnah will not be allowed to say that you can eat it as an oin. Is that right? That the mai is even weaker than a suffix. It's very important. We don't view the mai because Shema Eino Asur Lo Oinein. This is Balosh and Bitmiya. When you have a doubt and you separate Ma'aser Sheni, what do you think? It won't be Asur. Of course it will be Asur for an oin. But nevertheless over here we see that what that muter lo oin. So what is the mai? The mai is that not that we have a legitimate suffix. The Chachamim made a chumrah, led by Yerushalmi. He was machmer. It's a din. He made a din, but it's less than what I would do if I would have a doubt. Which is why we are allowed to have all of these leniencies. This is Gavaldik. Huh? Very good. I like that. So gebrachts is a bigger chumrah, but for someone to say that it's a suffix chametz, very good. Then how are you allowed to use the kalim that you make gebrachts on the shmini? I know that there's a year. In other words, there are certain things that we're saying the chachamim institutionalized. They legislated a stringency. Once it's legislated, I'm not going to call it a chumrah, but not pshat is that the Chachamim had a legitimate doubt and they just brought to my awareness, if that would have been the case, then an oinen would not be would not be allowed to eat the mai more than the chaimish, because the din is by ma'aser sheni vadai. If I did not give the chaimish, even though I have to give the chaimish, the pidyon happened. But the aninus, the Torah says lo yechalti, an oinen is not allowed to eat it. How can you say eat it? Here it's not b'shev al tasi. Here's b'kol aga oinen is going to be eating it, because the chachamim made a takana. They lechatchila never made it for an oinen. As far as the oinen is concerned, we follow din Torah. Din Torah is not a suffix, because din Torah is you follow roiv. Roiv Amaratzin took off all of the mices. Following a miut, which is taka miut hamatzui, that's called a chumrah that they then legislated. But I like what you said about the brachas. That was a very big chap. It's not a full year. So, a lot of saying good, and people that say it's a full year, it's not a full year. It's not that. It's because even though we're legislating the chumrah, but it's not chumrah for that. Unlike Belias. Belias is a problem. Tam ke'ikir, if it's doiraisa, then it's a problem doiraisa. Why we have to be hachsharas kelim for Pesach? Okay, right. Now, I just want you to look just for a second. The Rashi really on the left column, it's the middle. There's 5 lines before the bottom. There's a bracket. You see the bracket? And he writes that umishum the dam yahach sugya l'maydam v'ninan liyel gozer al davar matzui. We're going to now go back to the first din in the Mishnah regarding chomish. And the question is, why is the Gemara going out of the Seder? And I already told you that some people have a girsa that the Gemara that we're learning right now, Taman Taninon, they actually have it in the beginning by the two dots. No, we're going to follow the Seder that we have it right now. But Rashi Elio says we needed to introduce this concept that Takanas Chachamim is on Dover Hamatzui, and they don't make a Takana on a Dover She'eino Matzui, and that's going to explain one of the approaches in the following sugya. Just have that in mind. That's the Seder. Now, let's go to the chomish. Ma'aser sheni, when you played it, if you are the owner, you have to add a chomish. Is there a din of chomish when it comes to ma'aseres in other areas? The answer is yes, Rabbi Mendel. And that is that if a zor, the shoygeg, eats truma of a kohen, or if he eats ma'aser min ha-ma'aser, which is truma, then the zor has to give back the value of what he ate, the shoygeg, to the kohen, and he has to add a chomish. Don't forget that by the mai, even though we said clearly, we learned the Pnei Moshe in the beginning of the Masechta, the mai does not demand for the person who owns the mai, who bought the mai, to separate Truma Gedoyla. There is no, you don't do that, but the owner now has to separate Maisin and Amaisin and give it to a coin. But it's the mai. You would think that since the Mishnah says that Maisa Sheni shall demai doesn't have a chaimish, the same din would be that if Gzor eats Bishoigig, the Maisin and Amaisin of the mai, even though he has to give the value back to the coin, he also should not need to add a chaimish. Hold on. Problem is that Tamon Taninon, recording a Mishnah Bava Mitzia, that Ha Truma, whether it's Truma or whether it's Trumas Meiser, and even that's the key, Trumas Meiser shall demai. Zok the Mishnah that if a non-coin ate it, the right approach of compensation is to add the chaimish. Now, does that not contradict the Mishnah over here? Simple. Okay, now, I know this is Meiser Sheni. That's Meiser and a Meiser, but so what? It should be the same thing. If it would have a din of a vadai or a real suffix, got to add a chaimish. If it's a stringent,
Trumas Meiser is Meiser and a
Trumas Meiser, the same thing, because we call it Truma means a separation. The word Truma means harama and hafrasha. The word Meiser means 10%. Me'esed, one of 10, and the amount of Meiser and ha-Meiser is 10%, which is really 1% from the original. But anyways, back over here. So there's two answers, guys. The Gemara is going to give it Rab Ze'eda, Rav Imi, and then the Gemara is going to go back to Rab Ze'eda without saying it's doing so. K'minag ha-Yerushalmi, to be mekatzi. So Amar Rab Ze'eda, I'll tell you the difference. That Tamon means Dartin in Bava Mitzia. Indeed, we're only learning about Trumas Meiser Sheldamai. And Anachanami, and Lakula Alma, it's not a machlekes Tanoim. And when it comes to Trumas Meiser Sholdemai, the din is that when this shoygik happened, someone ate it up. Yes, you have to add a chaimish. There's a din chaimish. Over here, the Mishnah is only speaking about Meiser Sheni. Ramacha Meiser Sheni Sholdemai. Now, what is the nafkamina? Rab Ze'eda did not yet say, guys. Okay, but that is an obvious difference. So he says that's the answer. Rav Imi answers. Ein ha-Mishnah hazoi yoytze yedei trumas meiser sholdamai. Our Mishnah, I argue with you, Rabbi Zeda, our Mishnah that's giving leniencies. I know the Mishnah spoke about meiser sheni. Don't tell me that our leniencies only apply to meiser sheni, like you are saying, Rabbi Zeda, and it doesn't apply to trumas meiser. It applies to everything. You get his verbiage. Ein ha-Mishnah hazoi, the leniencies of our Mishnah are not yoytze trumas meiser sholdamai. It does, in other words, it does apply. So hold on. So ma kidoin oy bazoi, we got a problem. So now what do? If our Mishnah is saying, guys, that you have to add a chaimish, so how do you reconcile it? Right? It's a stira. So answers the Gemara. I'll tell you. Machlekes Tanoim. And I'm going to tell you that Bava Mitzia follows Rabbi Meir, and even though the Mishnah doesn't say Rabbi Meir, there is a rule, Stam Mishnah ke Rabbi Meir, so it works. Tamon Rabbi Meir, and over here, it follows the Chacham. So let me say like this, guys. The ground zero of this machlekes is fascinating. I know it's we don't have that much time, but it's good to chaz it every now and then. Even though Amar Rab Ze'eda, B'nais Yisrael, Lechmiru Alatzman, that even if a woman sees Tipas Dam Kechardel, Yesheves Allah, Shivas Nekiyim, and they took upon themselves today, when a woman becomes a Nida, right? All of the chumras of Nida and Zav Gedoyla, everything together. but that wasn't the way it is midin Torah. And even when Chumras began to happen, it didn't happen all at one time. Let's go back to the Zman that there was a huge difference between a Nida and a Zava, whether a woman sees blood in the 7 days of Nidus versus if she sees Dam during the 11 days that follow the 7 days of Nidus. And during those 7 days, David, during those 11 days, if a woman sees blood on 3 consecutive days, only then does she become a Zava Gedoyla. Only then is she chayv to count Shivas Nakim. Now, there is a din of a kesem. The din of a kesem means, midin Torah, a woman only becomes a nida. I don't care if the dam was in the time of nida, in the time of ziva, only if she had hergish. Let's go with the Rishonim that hold that even nowadays that most women don't have this hergish, but the period, that is the din of nida. What happens if a woman doesn't have any hergish? She had no sensation whether the hergish is psichas hamakar, whatever the big machlekes, whatever hergish means. And it's not a period. It's called in English, she spotted. She so much did not know about it that she did not know that it left her body. She found a blood stain on a garment. Now, think about it. What happens if a woman finds it? I know the din today. What's the din today? If a woman has a kesem, so you have to know the din summon. If it was on something that's white, if it's on something that's makabel tuma, if it had the size of a gris for oid, then what? This is the Rameh. Then she'll become, what do we do? She'll become a nida, we call her a nida, and she'll have to count Shivas Nakim. Today, we always count Shivas Nakim, even if she has Tipas Dam Kechardo. What about in the days that they only counted Shivas Nakim if a woman saw blood on 3 consecutive days? During the times of Ziva. During the time of Ziva, a woman finds a kesem. She doesn't know when it left her body. There is a suffix, there is a possibility that blood stain, actually, it left her body 3 days, 1 day, day 2, day 3, and now she's finding the sum total of the 3. That's a real suffix. Because maybe the blood left her body once, a lot in one time. You have a doubt. Now, if the whole tumah would have been do'iraisa, suffix do'iraisa, of course you'll be mach. But since the whole din kesem is only midrabanan, the chachamim hold she doesn't have to count shivas nakim. If I would know that it left her body 3 consecutive days, midrabanan din kesem is like a nida. Midrabanan we know the 3 days shivas nakim. But if you don't even know for 3 consecutive days, then she only then you don't do the zava, the dinay of zava gedol. You do the din of zava katana. Shemer Hashem keneged yom. That I've made, that's the what Meir says, no, even though the whole din kesem is midrabanan, just like if there would have been a doubt in a tumadoi raisa, we would have to be machmer and say maybe it came on 3 consecutive days. We have to say the same thing over here. That's the ground zero, which is negate to our topic, that Rav Meir holds that you have to be noyeg with the chumras that one has to have by doubts midoi raisa. You have to be noyeg on that midrabanan, and now it works. Rav Meir holds the ma'isa derabbanan, but there is a doubt. So Rav Meir holds at a chomish, and the Rav Meir in the Mishnah Bava Metzia that was only speaking about ma'aser mena ma'aser really means ma'aser mena ma'aser and ma'aser sheni. Over here we are following the chachamim. The chachamim hold no. That's one of the differences. There is differences. We're not as machmer kidivreim kishal toira, so we're more lenient than Anachanami. Our Mishnah says you're lenient by Meiser Sheni. Our Mishnah is about Meiser Sheni. Our Tana, the Chachamim will hold that the same thing would be by Meiser and HaMeiser. Meiser and HaMeiser is like a bad case. If someone did a sin, b'shreigig. I know, but if that were to happen, then if a person ate the Truma or Meiser and HaMeiser, they have to give a Chaimish. If you ate Meiser and HaMeiser Sholdemai, you don't give a Chaimish. That's good. Okay, now what we didn't explain was Rab Ze'eda. Rab Ze'eda is saying that everything is the Rabbanon, and there's no machloikas over here. Our Mishnah never spoke about Meiser and Meiser, which it didn't. Our Mishnah about the question is why would there be a difference? The Gemara didn't explain yet. So now the Gemara explains that Rab Ze'eda Amar b'Shem Rabbanon b'din hayom trumas Meiser shel demai shel yafla shel chaimesh. You're right. When lechatchila demai did not demand the chaimesh because it's demai. it was going to go also on a Trumas Mais. But then the Chachamim said, well, 1 second, you have to take it off. Why do you have to take it off? For the same reason. Why did we just learn before? That's the Rashid Elio. Why did they say that even Maisa Sheni Shaldumai cannot be eaten the Tumah? Because Tumah is something that's Matzui. And if you were to be allowed to eat Maisa Sheni Betuma, the words of the Rashid Elio, which means no one would take it off. If I can eat it Betuma, I know it's not Maisa Sheni. So they felt that if you would have, if you would not have to give a chaimish, the word gedeira, which is a geder, offense, means gezeira, mishum gezeira. That what? That she'im at oimer loy shelo yafish, if he won't have to compensate by paying a chaimish if he eats it inadvertently, then afu einenoi bar kedusha. Pasha. You got it? So hold on. So why don't we say the same thing over here? That you should have to take up the chaimish, like we just said. Because of an opposite gezeda, different type of gezeda. What's the gezeda over here? If you have to, when you redeem it, if you have to add a fifth, which costs money, then he won't take off the ma'aser sheni itself. Hold on. What about ma'aser sheni? What about ma'aser min ha'ma'aser? Ma'aser min ha'ma'aser is something that people understand the chumrah of it. For the same reason that even Amaratzim took off Truma Gedoyla, from their ignorance, they thought that if they don't separate ma'aser rishon and they don't take off ma'aser min ha'ma'aser, they thought it's not tevel, but it is tevel. In other words, anything that touches the word truma has so much more kedusha. And Azad eats it as chayv misa b'dei shamayim. People are very machmer over there. They were not afraid that you wouldn't separate ma'aser min ha'ma'aser. They were not afraid of that. Like because that is truma. Very good. And therefore, it's like truma. Bottom line is, nothing negative will happen. You have to separate ma'aser min ha'ma'aser. If you eat it up, you have to take off a chaimish. It's like that's the whole gezeda. By ma'aser sheni, you have to separate ma'aser sheni. Why will you have to do it? But they put a break on that. They put a break on that by saying, don't make it more expensive. The very fact that I have to separate ma'aser sheni and I have to schlep it to Yerushalmi is enough. If you're going to push the envelope all the way at the end, then people are going to say, oh, it's only ma'aser sheni, and they might be noyeg. That's the logic of Rabbi Zaid. Now we're moving on to the next Mishnah. And the next one in the Mishnah is, the words of the Mishnah is that Uma'abdin esmiyutay badrachim. When we learned the Mishnah yesterday, we learned the Pnei Moshe that explained it on both levels. The second level, we're going to go to the second one, right? It's not about if I find it on the road, do I have to pick it up or not? What happens if I lose it? If I lose a little bit, I can leave it. We allow for some of it to get lost. Okay? Says the Gemara, Rabbun Barchia asked in front of Rabbi Lamali Demai. This issue that if something falls off, that you can leave it. You're not chayiv to pick it up. Why is that only a leniency that we have by Demai Yafilu Badai? We'll see in a moment the Gemara's question. And furthermore, Lamali Miut, that even by Demai, how do you define Miut? I don't know. The Mishnah says a little bit falls.
Okay, but Demai is not even subject to Truma B'chlal, so what is about it falls out?
In other words, it has some sanctity. It has some sanctity. Why didn't you pick it up and go eat it in Yerushalmi? So the Mishnah says that by Demai, a little bit we can leave. But the Gemara is asking 1 second, what your question? And if it's Vadai, so what? Listen, I'm not eating it outside Yerushalmi. But I didn't eat it. And why only meat? Why not Roy? And Veloy Chen Tanei, and more than that. It says in Abraisa, we quoted this in our introduction, that the owner is not chayiv to bring truma from the threshing floor to the city. He's not chayiv to bring it from the middle to the yishuv. Okay, he's not obligated to do it, guys. The havamina is, first of all, there's two dinim. Din number one is, guys, remember this. Even though the owner gets to choose to what coin to give it to, he doesn't have to bring it to the coin. He could. He's not chayiv. He can tell the coin, you want it, you can't pick it up. The havamina is that the Braisa is saying that he doesn't have to bring it, even in a scenario where no kohanim will come, and it's going to go to waste. That's the havamina. we'll see that's not the case. If it's going to be going to waste, he is chayiv. The havamina is he doesn't have to bring it to them. The only exception is that elim kain hois b'makim shechaya goyrarto. There's one thing, guys, if it's going to waste because no one picked it up. That's one thing. The havamina is that even there he can allow it to go to waste. Now, leaving something going to waste is not as bad as when you know there's a bunch of wild animals. When you go away every night, all of the leftover food is going to be dragged away. If that's the case, then mevia. And even there, you take compensation from the kohen. You take compensation. You make transportation. However, you charge for the transportation. So what do we see over here? We see the havamina is, guys, I can even abandon Truma Gedoyla Vlad. If I can abandon Truma Gedoyla, why should I not be allowed to abandon Meiser Sheni and Evadai and Alat? So the Gemara says you didn't understand the Braisa. Omar Lei Rabbi Ila responds, you don't understand that the Braisa is telling you that if not for Chaya Goyrarto, which is a bizoyin, you can let it there even though it's going to go to waste. Absolutely not. You cannot let it go to waste. Why? He says, when I find someone else's lost article, I have a biblical obligation of being Meshav Aveda. So it goes without doubt that even though I didn't yet give it to a kohen, it belongs to the Kahanim. If I know this truma is going to waste, I also have to bring it to them. When the Braisa says that I can leave it there, I don't have to take it there, we're speaking about a scenario where it will not go to waste. You know how long grain can last? People used to store grain, hurdus, for years. So I have grain. Braisa says I don't have to bring it to them. But let it going it to waste by Truma Gedoyla, nothing of it. By Meiser Sheni, nothing. You can't let it go to waste. Interestingly, by Truma Gedoyla, it's Hashavas Haveda. By Meiser Sheni, it's not Hashavas Haveda because it belongs to me. But still, we're saying, don't prove from the Braisa. You don't have any. The Braisa is not allowing you to let Truma go to waste. Meiser Sheni cannot be allowed to be abandoned, to go to waste. Elama, if it's only the Mai and it's a little bit, then you could. It's like, guys, it's like Bal Tashkis. I want to give a good example. I don't know why it's by for bringing over here. The Zohar says that we have a minute that when you cut a loaf of bread, you dafka don't eat up the whole bread. You dafka don't. You cut off an edge. And you let that go to waste. And the Zohar says that's called giving the bone to the dog, meaning that wastefulness is klipa, kedusha is exact. In the world of kedusha, there is no waste. Waste is klipa. So, but if a person were to think that we human beings, that's a chaynik ben agrei samalach, and everything is perfect, you'll go out of your mind. Epis. So there's levels of that. In other words, Meiser Sheni, Avadai, even a little bit, you can't let it go to waste. Go take it to Yerushalmi. In Yerushalmi, leave a little bit. Don't leave it outside Yerushalmi. We don't say you can throw away bread.
Hashavas Aveda, you can also take noizel domim in a shevet. Hashavas Aveda.
Can you take money? No.
For delivering it or for like the whatever.
No. In other words, I let me understand like this, Shlomo. The coin had to be here. The coin was not. I'll tell you different. What happens if the owner? I'll tell you. If a person abandons their own stuff, we learned that. We learned this in Bava Metzia. We learned this in the Rambam. If an owner has this and he throws it, and I see him that he was negligent, legamre, I have no obligation of Hashavas Aved. If the coin is not coming, you have to come. I can charge for transportation. But on the other hand, I can't leave it there. Hashavas Aved, that's the balance. The bottom line is there's no raya from the Braisa that you can abandon Truma Gedoyla. You may not. And we may not abandon any of Meiser Sheni Vadai. And the Chiddush is, since it's only the Mai is like maybe Chulin. By Chulin that we just quoted, a Chulin epis you can let go. That's the minute today. You leave you don't have to eat up the whole plate. It's actually midarah. Leave a little bit, cleaning the plate. It looks like you're overindulgent. By Baltashkis, I know, but epis. And that's what the Mishnah is saying. You're traveling, something falls out of the thing. Traveling with kids, they have a minute, the kids, to throw things out of the window. They have to go and pick it up. No. Unless it's Meiser Sheni Badai. That has some kedusha. That you have to pick up. All right, Gavin, to be continued.